Every day, people all over the world make choices. Choices about the clothes they wear, the strangers they smile at, and the people they associate with. Many of these choices are governed by prejudices based around fashion, skin colour, religion or capacity. Some of these prejudices are conscious and others unconscious. All of them are dangerous. In this program, we'll explore the nature and impact of prejudice. We'll look at what's in and what isn't. We'll ask the question, why? Look at what it means to be different, the impact of prejudice, and what we can do about prejudice. We'll talk to a number of people along the way.
I think it's also kind of human nature to be scared of things that are different. Like, you might not be consciously scared, but it's like human nature to be suspicious of something you don't understand or you don't get or that's different to you.
In contemporary society, prejudice is a dirty word. It connotates images of exclusion, discrimination, violence, ignorance and hurt. It makes us think of moments in history such as black slavery in the United States, apartheid in South Africa, civil war in Rwanda, and Aboriginal child removal in Australia, and the many prejudices that have come to exist in the post-September 11 world. We know it's not cool to have prejudices against people because of their age, skin colour, culture, religion, ability or disability, hair colour, clothing choices or football team. And yet prejudices surround us every day. Often without knowing it, even the most well-intentioned people can perpetrate prejudice. "I'm not prejudiced, but" is a common precursor to many examples of daily prejudice. Take a look at these images. What kinds of ideas do you have about these people? Do you think these people fit in with mainstream society, or are they different? What ideas do we form about these people based on their appearance?
You tend to think either they're better than you or like not good enough, and so you kind of hard to get along with them when you think they're different. Like if you see a people with tattoo, you're just assuming that they're really bad, really violent type of thing, and you don't want to get along with them because you might get harm or something.
Prejudice means taking one aspect of a person's character or appearance and using it to represent the whole of that person, usually to their disadvantage. People who attribute a whole range of qualities to somebody on the basis of their colour, gender, appearance, culture or capacity are engaging in prejudice.
Prejudice is both an action and an attitude. It starts off as an attitude that you have, that one characteristic about somebody represents a whole lot of other features, and then you act on that to basically put that person down or work against their interests.
Okay, thanks.
Prejudice leads to discrimination. This is where people act on the basis of established prejudices to exclude people from activities, work, or rights entitled to them by law. Prejudice arises largely out of ignorance. Any girl who's worn a miniskirt in summer knows that they are comfortable, practical, fashionable and common. In the 1960s, however, it was a different story. Women who wore miniskirts when the clothing first emerged as a fashion trend were viewed as sexually promiscuous. During the 1950s in the United States, prejudice forced African American people to travel in separate sections of public transport than their white counterparts. Can you imagine that kind of segregation today?
Make us right.
Prejudice in the 21st century may not seem overt, and yet we remain a prejudiced society. For example, it is still easy to associate a woman's clothing with sexual promiscuity. And we need only to think about our post-September 11 world to know that a person's religion connotates ideas about their propensity to violence.
For some reason, human societies have always worked on having an in-group and an outer group, and that's something that I guess has been tribal, really. Fortunately, in the modern times, we don't need to have such tribal mentalities. Unfortunately, people perpetuate those and often look for ways to reject some people while keeping others in a smaller group.
Unconsciously, Many people still associate skin colour, gender, religion, and other factors with prejudicial ideas. Prejudice means taking one aspect of a person and using it to define their whole being. Prejudice arises out of ignorance. Many prejudices of the past are less overt today, and yet prejudice still exists. Society continues to place people in boxes of acceptable and different.
I think some people, especially very naive people, have a train of thought that when they see a person in a wheelchair, that person suddenly can't do anything, they can't defend themselves, they can't talk for themselves, and if they do, they suddenly think, whoa, that person's actually taking control of their life. I didn't think they could do that. So I think sometimes when people see people in wheelchairs, they just think they're some sort of freak and that we're weirdos.
Prejudice and prejudicial behaviour can occur in surprising places and circumstances. People may dislike the idea of prejudice, but still act and think in prejudicial ways. This is because many prejudicial thoughts about what it is to be part of the norm or different from the norm are learnt early on in life. Even very educated, open-minded and community-focused people can find themselves unconsciously falling into prejudicial ways of thinking or behaving.
Most young people intellectually don't like prejudice. However, probably without even realising it, they have their own set prejudices. They often unconsciously inherit those prejudices from their parents and then enact them in schools.
Anyone who has ever used the word all to describe the actions, thoughts or beliefs of a group of similarly gendered or ethnically related people has acted in a prejudicial way.
There were certain times in which I felt like maybe my aides or maybe some of the kids didn't want me there for certain reasons, like the aides certainly thought I was a problem for them and a problem for the other kids. And I think some of that reason was because I was in some ways more challenged than some of the other kids.
In Ariane's view, the very people employed to assist her at her first high school displayed their own prejudices in the way they treated her. This experience tells something about the relationship between prejudice and power. By allowing her personality to shine, Ariane showed herself to be strong rather than weak. This challenged the power relationship between aide and client.
We're quite okay when the differences are perceived as deficits, because of course what that means is the person's less of a threat. When somebody has a strong belief system or a way of being powerful that might threaten our own kind of success, that's when we really start to get scared of them.
I tell them what I want and I tell them what I need, and I think sometimes they didn't like being told what to do, and they didn't like being told they have to take me to the toilet now because I'm busting. They didn't like me taking control of my own education to a point. They just wanted to be in control all the time.
So, how are prejudices formed? Are we born with prejudices, or do we learn them? Prejudices develop in many ways. The simple stereotypes we learn as children via channels such as the blonde joke and the correlation between eyeglasses and the nerd label contribute to the formation of prejudices that can remain in later life. The behaviour and examples set by family, friends and society in general also shape many unconscious prejudices. For example, most world leaders are male, so how does this shape our thoughts about gender relations? Examples of prejudice in the mainstream media of film, television, print and radio also serve to reinforce prejudices already existing in the dominant culture.
I really like 24, TV show, and I got like every season. And there's been like, there's been like 6 seasons or something. And I think there's been 4 seasons where the bad guy has been Muslim. And I think it's got a lot to do with that. Like, if the media, says, oh, Greeks, they're gonna kill you, everyone's gonna be scared of Greek people. But it's that sort of thing. Like, the media plays a big role in how we form prejudice, because it's like how we get our information.
Prejudices are also formed and fed by fear.
Prejudice emanates out of fear. I'm scared of that person because they're different from me. I don't understand them. And because of that, basically, all people that have that difference will be not likeable, will not be somebody I would like to mix with.
Ariane Garner-Williams understands better than most what it is to experience prejudice, but she also knows why it occurs. The prejudicial behaviour she experienced came from her aide's refusal to look beyond their own ideas of disability to see Ariane as a person of ability.
And that's who I am. I take control of what I do, and I like what I do, and I love my life. And they didn't like that. I sometimes felt that they didn't like me at all because of my personality.
People may dislike the idea of prejudice and yet still unconsciously perpetrate it. Prejudice is learnt early, and many prejudices remain with us into adulthood. There is a relationship between power and prejudice. Prejudices are formed through stereotypes, the examples set by family and friends, the media, and fear of the unknown.
I think I'll never forget the first time I walked into class at Wellington. It was actually myself and another Muslim girl. We were both wearing the hijab, which is the headscarf. We both walked into the quiet classroom, and everyone just stopped and turned, and sort of like there was like a collective gasp, which was really interesting. And I think it was that moment that I realised this year was probably going to be a bit more difficult than what I had thought, because to me it had never even crossed my mind that it would be difficult or it would be, much different to my old school. But I think that moment was very like important for me and my friend.
Difference from the norm forms the basis of most prejudice. But before we can know what's different, we must have an understanding of the norm by which all other things are made different. Think about the word normal. What exactly does it mean?
Every person is different. Every person has a different personality, has different interests and whatnot, different likes and dislikes. That's what makes everyone unique. So there's no really normal person in society.
The norm, as society defines it, is usually the majority. Anyone who doesn't conform to the conventions and rules of that majority will often be viewed as different. Instead of celebrating this difference and looking at how to learn from it, the trend in most societies is to shy away from difference.
Well, yes, I think we are all normal. I think that people have there's a vast range of individualities. And unfortunately, in our society, they've narrowed dramatically in the last few years. We don't sort of see as many characters. We don't have as much higher tolerance for idiosyncrasies, different types of people. In fact, one of the great fears, I think, is that we're all becoming a little bit like carbon copies of one another.
Some differences are deemed more acceptable than others. Do you have the same prejudices towards a person using a walking stick as you might towards a person in a wheelchair? Both people have a physical difference. Is one disability deemed more acceptable than the other? What about religious societies? In Western Judeo-Christian societies, Muslims and Buddhists are both different to the majority. But are people from these two religions viewed in similar or different ways? So how does it feel to be different?
Well, when I first came, and I started at English Language Center, and I was so alone because nobody wanted to talk to me because maybe I looked different or I was new and they didn't really know me, and they started judging me by the way I look because I was the only one who came from Uganda in that school, and nobody really wanted to get around me.
A person who's different from the majority has two choices. The first way to fit in is to become like the mainstream and ignore their difference. This means that person will need to deny a part of themselves, maybe their culture, their religion, or their beliefs, so as to find acceptance. Do you think this is a positive outcome?
The second way that somebody who is different can gain acceptance is by actually being strong and standing up and saying, well, I am different. This is the ways that I'm different. And in fact, rather than seeing that as a source of shame, I actually am proud of those differences.
I think the way I cope most of the time is just do the opposite of what they think I'd do. So when someone's saying something really nasty, I'll just look back and flash them a big smile.
Difference forms the basis of most prejudice. The norm is usually set by the majority in a society. Those who operate outside the norm are considered different. Many people distance themselves from difference. Some differences are more acceptable than others. People who are different must choose whether to conform to the norm or stand up for their difference.
I was going to a mate's party with someone from here. She was a married lady, and we were just talking about work and why we're here and what a great job we're doing in terms of like educating the broader community about Aboriginal culture. And one of the ladies that was sitting in front of us, she kind of turned around and said, well, you know, why don't you just shut up? I'm sick of you people always complaining. Don't you get enough government help?
Prejudicial behaviour has a damaging impact on the people at its receiving end. Prejudicial behaviour inflicts loneliness on the victim. This is because prejudice means being singled out and alienated from the mainstream group.
Well, the worst thing about that was that everyone on the tram was yelling at me to get off, and even the tram driver. But everyone had seen that I didn't sort of start the argument, that it just, yeah, she did, and I was just defending myself.
Nobody likes the feeling of alienation. This is why solitary confinement is such a powerful punishment.
If you basically stand away from the normal mainstream of culture, then the risk is that you are left out on purpose. You're basically somebody that is not seen as desirable.